Hi, my name is Cecilia Vu, and my infographic is on the Nike Air Max shoes. In this video, I'm going to talk about how I've created this infographic based on the skills that I've learned in class. First, I'm going to talk about visual potential, and visual potential is how the potential of information is communicated into a graphic form. So first, we're going to talk about appearance. Exploiting the visual potential of appearance means to display a graphical representation to give context to the topic of the infographic. And we can see here that I have two appearance displays, and in each display, we can see that there is either a large detailed graphic of the Air Max shoe. On the left one, we can see I have one, and on the right one, we can see that I have two. And the shoes are enlarged and use a different number of highlight colors to draw attention to the viewer. There's also supporting text to give a basic explanation or description of the topic or graphic itself. Next, we're going to talk about relationship. Exploiting the visual potential of relationship to me means to show how concepts link to one another. This can be shown with either lines, steps, source to destination paths, or Venn diagrams. In mine, I use lines to show the relationship between the two Air Max models and how they share the same air sole unit. This display educates the viewers on a major component of the technology of the shoe with the air sole unit. And we can see here that in the shoes, we can see there's the little circles towards the back of the shoe with leader lines that lead to what the air sole unit looks like. And then there's also a description below to give more context. Next, I'm going to talk about time. Explaining the visual potential of time to me means to show events in time. Here I used a timeline to show a few Air Max releases from the first three major releases to the most recent three releases. We can see here that I gave a little bit of context with an annotation at the top, and I have a timeline event with the year, the name of the model, and a detailed outline of the model dating back from 1987 um, until the most recent release in 2019. Next, I'm going to talk about numbers. Exploiting the visual potential of numbers to me means to translate a number into a graphical representation. We can see here on the bottom right that I chose to use an isotype chart to represented by shoes. And I gave initial context to this isotype chart first, where I displayed some annotations at the top with the number 2 billion highlighted with a little bit of a description about how $2 billion in revenue was generated at retail for two specific Air Max models. And then I broke down this number to show that that's over 5 million pairs every year, and that's how I developed the isotype chart to represent that 5 million pairs, which is why I chose shoes as the symbol. Now we're going to move on and talk about encoding. Encoding means to translate attributes of data or information using size, color, position, length, or amount. So we're first going to talk about how I use encoding in relationship. First, I use color to differentiate between the two shoe models since they look fairly similar on first glance. I used blue for the Nike Air Max 1 and I also matched the label to that. And then I used this pink and purple for the Nike Air Max 90 and I as well used the label to match that. I also used position to display the Air Max 1 on the left since this shoe model came first, as our eyes tend to view things from left to right. Another color encoding I used was with the air sole unit on the right and the emphasized text below that. Using the same yellow helps draw that the descriptive text is specifically about the air sole unit. Next, I'm going to talk about time. I alternated between the pink, blue, and yellow colors for each timeline event to each separate each event, since they aren't spaced out that much because I was constrained to the width. So this helps differentiate between each event. I also use position as the timeline moves from left to right, and we can see that there is an arrow to help guide this direction. The leftmost event is the first shoe that was released, and the rightmost event is the most shoe that is released. Now we're going to talk about how I use encoding in my numbers display. First, we can see that the amount was used as an encoding for the isotype chart, as there are 5 shoe symbols to represent the 5 million. I also use color to highlight specific text, such as the $2 billion part. Now I'm going to talk about the color model that I chose. My model uses color to highlight elements, give tone, and encode any information or data attributes. We can see that the main highlight colors are pink, blue, and yellow, which are complementary colors. If you look at the left section of my color model, we can see that in the bar graph that the colors are used for encoding and that the text above the colors are also used for highlighting. If you also look closer at the bars, there is a grayish blue graphic color that is used for either graphics or the text above. This is a more subtle color with the background that doesn't highlight too much. And you can see how in my infographic I've used this as section backgrounds. We can see in my model that white is also used for some text, and that white and gray are used for lines. Now if we look on the right where the pie chart is, there is a range of gradients that give texture to the slices, but are also used as color encodings for each measure. In my infographic, the pink, blue, and yellow colors are used as color encodings as I've discussed previously. We can also see that I've used the pink and yellow to highlight and emphasize any text. And gradients are also used widely across my shoe graphics to give texture and detail. This is the typography model that I have. The main font that I used was Brandon Grotesque, and then another font was Riz Teen that I used once in the title, which was used once in the title for the model as well. For Brandon Grotesque, there's a range of variation with the weight and the size depending on the type of text. For all titles and section headings and any emphasized text, the font weight is bold, and then everything else is medium font weight. And we can see here that in my infographic that the title is bold, and then throughout the infographic, any larger text is also bold. And then other supporting annotations or descriptions are a medium font weight. Now I'm going to talk about the visual language model that I chose. I followed specific elements very closely, so throughout these next few slides, I will break down each section to show how I have done this. On the left here is the header of the model and my infographic. You can see here that I used the title and description text below, and that there's the same line treatment with the curvy lines that act as the waves, and there's also a use of a lighter header background color. The model also uses lines to represent water coming out to match the topic. So instead, I used lines to represent shoelaces coming out of the title. There's also a graphic coming out from the bottom right corner of the header. And on the right side, we can see an appearance display and how they are contained in a rectangular section with a large section header and description text below that are aligned together. Then there's two detailed graphics on the right side. Next, I'm going to talk about the relationship display. And we can see that I used the same line treatment for the leader lines with a dashed line coming out at an angle. I also use the same outline thickness for all the circles as well. For the graphics, they are detailed in the outline, similar to the graphics in the visual language model with the brains. There's also a label included underneath each shoe, which is also done in the visual language model for the brains. For the description text on the right, I made any emphasized text larger and also highlighted it in a different color. We can see that in the model this is done as well with any highlighted text in white. For the section header title, a little bit of the text is hidden behind the graphic. We can see that this is also done in the model where the word brains is a little bit hidden underneath the graphic. Moving on to the right, we can see that in the visual language model that there are 7 circles with an icon within each circle, and there is a rectangle overlapping the bottom of the circle with the label inside the rectangle. I use this for my timeline display, except I transformed the rectangle into an arrow to better represent my timeline to use it appropriately. But I still included the icon inside the circle and the label as well. And then there's also a descriptive text above with any emphasized text enlarged and bolder. Next, I'm going to move on to the numbers display where there is a large emphasized number, which is the 2 billion part, in a different color, and then there's an annotation text to the right of that. We can see that in the visual language model, this was done as well with a black number on the left side that is large, and then annotation text to the right. And then they are contained in a dashed rectangle. And then there is a large graphic that is overlaying the bottom left corner of this dashed rectangle. Then there is another large number that is related to this top section. And this number is represented with an isotype chart with a multiplying number, where the labels are used in a bracket form. Then for the display on the right, there is a rectangular contained section with text on the inside, and any emphasized text is enlarged and bolded. Then there is a detailed filled graphic in the top right corner that is displayed at an angle. Then for the footer section, I used the same thin curved lines for the line treatment, and then there is a solid curved section as well, a solid filled curve section. I want to talk closely about the object graphics that are used in the visual language model and how I followed this for my shoe graphics. For the detailed objects with fill and outline, we can see that the detail for the whale is created with the lines to give lots of texture and dimension. And we can see that in my shoes, I use the little ovals to kind of give texture to the fabric. And then for the back section of the shoe where the gradient is, we can kind of see that there's a little bit of a dimension. You can see that that part sticks out a little bit. And then color is used for these graphics as well. Then there is graphics that are just used, where lines are just used for the detailing. We can see that in the brains that most of the detail comes from just the lines itself. So I try to use this with an outline for my shoes too. Then there are also solid filled objects that are used to represent the object more simply as symbols. Moving on to visual hierarchy. Visual hierarchy helps guide the viewer's attention to view more important information first. I use a range of text sizes with larger text giving more emphasis and having more importance, while smaller texts are of less importance. Within annotations, we can see that specific text is emphasized, which would draw a viewer's attention in first before reading the rest of the text. I also used bright colors to provide visual hierarchy. Um, since there is a shoe graphic in each section, using the bright colors could draw the viewer's attention there first to give them more of a representation in their head of the shoe before reading any annotation text related to this graphic. Now I'm going to talk about unity and variety. Unity is being able to use colors, size, texture, and shapes across an infographic to give a sense of unity. But it is also important to use variety as well. Variety is using different variations of color, size, and texture to make an infographic look more interesting or dynamic. Color is used cohesively throughout each graphic to give unity since I used the same blue, pink, and yellow. We can see this in my timeline display as I'm alternating the colors. But I also use color for variety as well since I had a lot of colors to choose from with the gradients. There is also variety in the detailing of the graphics, as some of the graphics use gradients for fills, some of the graphics use gradients for outline, some are just white outlines, and then some of the shoe graphics are just completely filled objects. This gives it a lot of different textures, especially between the ones with the filled gradients versus the filled objects, the ones that are completely filled. I also used variation in header sizes for emphasized text as well. Now moving on to layout. Layout deals with the size, position, and groupings of elements in the infographic. I used the same layout model as my visual and typography model, and since I follow the elements of my visual model quite closely, I was able to easily mimic the arrangements for the layout as well. Overall, my layout has a vertical orientation. Even though I decided to leave some elements from the layout model and the visual language model out, I was still able to arrange each section to display vertically. As we can see here in the header section is the first section all the way at the top. Then there is my appearance display next below this. The appearance display has the rectangular section background, and we can see that represented in my infographic and the model as well. Below this appearance display is the relationship display, where the circle is overlapping the rectangle from the section above a little bit. And in the model, we can see that the same section is below this with the circle overlapping the section above as well. And next in my infographic is the time display, where each time event is represented with the circle and the overlapping rectangle at the bottom. And we can see that in the model that this same section with the 7 circles is displayed next as well. Then below my timeline is the numbers display, where we can see that I use the isotype chart. And then in the layout model, we can also see that the numbers display is there as well, with the large graphic and then the isotype chart. Below this numbers display in my infographic is another appearance display with the large rectangle and then the slightly angled graphic. And we can see that in the model that there is also that same rectangle and then another graphic that is in the top right corner overlapping the rectangle at an angle. Then I have the footer at the bottom. Everything is separated with space, and some elements have graphics or text that overlap each other to know that they are grouped together. Such as in the numbers display and the appearance displays, we can see that the shoes somewhat overlap the little corners, whether it's the bottom left or the top right, to know that they are grouped together. Some sections are also contained in rectangles to help with the grouping as well. Now moving on to alignment. Alignment is to arrange elements so that they line up. Elements are vertically aligned on the left and right side. And in the relationship display and time display, you can also see that elements are aligned horizontally within these sections as well. For the relationship display, we can see that the shoes um, are aligned horizontally and that everything is kind of contained in a horizontal section. And then for the time display, each timeline event is also aligned horizontally as well so that we can easily follow from left to right. And here is my final infographic next to my visual language model, typography model, color model, and layout model.